Good afternoon, and distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your kind words. And thank you for your warm welcome and your hospitality. It is truly an honor to be here with all of you. Before I make my formal remarks, let me state for the record that I do not speak on behalf of any organization or agency of the United States government. My comments are made as a private citizen of the United States. I mention that because I have served on many advisory boards when President Obama was the President of the United States for the U.S. Government Department in the past. I also served on the board of the trustees of the Kennedy Centers and many other organizations, including Wilson Center and Brookings Center. Let me also state that I'm here to speak not as a geopolitical expert, not as an international relations scholar, not as an economist, but as a civically engaged Indian business, an Indian American business person whose motherland is in India, who love India, and whose homeland is the United States of America. And I love America. What's best in me, I owe it to India and the United States. I love both countries and recognize that they are by far the two largest democracies in the world, and the future of these democracies is central to the future of democracies and democratic values. Democratic and diversity are the two values that binds us together, that brings us together. And when we are together, we can help shape a better future for the world. I recognize that neither the US nor India is perfect, far from it. But I firmly believe that if these two countries can cooperate and form the right kind of strategic relations on matters of all types, they can be the standard bearer and standard setters, improving the lives of the citizens in their responsible country and collaborating to make the world a better and a fairer place. That is my perspective. Now let me turn to the heart of the matter, my thoughts on the state of the India-US relation, past, present, and the future. For purpose of this task, I have divided the past state of those relations into two periods, from 1995 to 1990, and from 1990 to 2016. I've classified the present state as the period for the Trump presidency in the United States, which at this moment is from 2017 through 2020. And I look at the future state from 2020 going forward. In my remarks, I will present a historical overview of the past, a snapshot of the present, and my top-line assessment for the future. I must admit this is a daunting task, as it will take volumes and volumes to give these relations a full and a proper treatment. I'm aware that many of you are extremely knowledgeable and intimately familiar with the history of US-India relations. Therefore, I will not go into detail on the past state. Indeed, I will highlight some important historical issues and background and concentrate the bulk of my attention on the present and the future states. My goal is to provide the proper context for our distinguished panel to carry forward the discussion. So that said, let me begin by examining the years from 1947 to 1990. I had labeled that period the fledgling relationship between India and the United States. When India became independent in 1947, shortly after the World War II, the US-led bloc of democratic nations and the USSR-led communist bloc were vying for influence globally. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, chose to pursue an independent foreign policy from a group of nations called the Non-Aligned Movement. New Delhi called itself a non-aligned nation that in reality tilted towards Moscow. Because of this, India and the United States were essentially indifferent to each other. There was cooperation in several fields such as higher education and agriculture, but relations were not great politically. The ties reached their lowest during the 1970s This was primarily due to three issues. Number one, the first issue was the India-Pakistan war over Bangladesh liberation, with India supporting Bangladesh and US supporting Pakistan. The second issue that resulted in the escalation of tension between India and the United States was India's detonation of nuclear bombs in 1974. The third issue was the growing economic nationalism in India throughout the 1970s, which saw the nationalization of some sectors of the economy and forcing American companies such as Coca-Cola and IBM to close their India operations. The late 1970s brought the Soviet invasion and occupation of Afghanistan to make South Asia a theater in the Cold War. This increased America's financial and military support to Pakistan. After the turbulent 1970s, relations between India and the US were very quiet throughout 1980s. Let me now turn the period from 1990 to 2016, which I label the strengthening relationship between India and the United States. As you all know, relations between the two countries have improved dramatically since the 1990s. There are many factors that have driven that improvement. I want to highlight three: the end of Cold War, the liberalization of India's economy, and the growing influence of the Indian American diaspora community in the United States. I will analyze each of these factors briefly. Number one, the end of Cold War meant that the New Delhi has to build a better relationship with Washington, and it began doing so. The rise of China over the past decade and one half have accelerated that relationship development. And the US-India civil nuclear agreement constructed during the Bush administration and the tenures of Prime Minister Vajpayee and Prime Minister Singh signaled a new direction in US-India relations, which has been built upon since the US-India nuclear deal was signed in 2008. The second part, the Indian economy was liberalized in 1991 in response to an acute financial crisis. Because of that liberalization, American businesses flocked to India. Those businesses have used their economic, political, and financial might to improve the US relations with India. The third, the Indian-American community has grown exponentially both in numbers and influence since the 1990s. The game changer for Indian immigration was the high-tech revolution of the 1990s. Thanks to H-1B visa, more than 1 million Indians have immigrated to the United States in the past 25 years. Over the years, those immigrants have become permanent residents of the United States and citizens, and thus part of the US political system. They began making campaign donations, voting for candidates of their choice, and lobbying for their elected representative. They have become a powerful and vocal lobbying force advocating for better relations with India. I firmly believe that Indian diaspora has the capacity, the capability, and the responsibility to help India to achieve its fullest potential. Those are the three factors that contributed substantially to the strengthening of India and the United States relations between 1990 to the end of 2016. That brings me to the present, the time period from January 20th, 2017, when President Trump took office as the president until his first term is scheduled to be completed on January 20th, 2021. I have labeled this period the erratic relationship between India and the United States. I struggled with what to name the relationship. Other words that came to my mind included unilateral, chaotic, and isolationist. I selected erratic not because it applies just to US-India relations, but because I believe it fairly characterizes all relations, both international and in the United States during the Trump presidency. Nothing is for certain. Everything is dependent on the mood, and understanding of President Trump. There's no art to the deal. It's all about getting it your way and winning. Collaboration and compromise under this administration are dirty words. Even though there has been much progress and considerable strengthening of India-US relations over the past decade, there were still several serious issues on which the United States and India had their differences when Trump became the President of the United States. India's relations with Iran, which is an enemy of America, is one such issue. Similarly, US-Pakistan relations are seen with skepticism in India. Though the United States has been tough on Pakistan since the 9/11, New Delhi thinks Washington can and should do more to fight terrorism. India has also been unhappy over the US restriction on H-1B visas, which has affected Indian IT companies doing business in the United States. Under the Trump administration, life has become even tougher for these firms. The slow pace of the economic reform in India continues to frustrate American businesses. Robert, a lot was expected from the Prime Minister, but he has failed to live up to the expectation so far, much to the disappointment of American businesses. He has not replicated the success he has had in Gujarat at the national level. I'm not here to complain or criticize the Prime Minister Modi. He is a very strong, savvy, and smart man. He is committed to strengthen and broaden and deepen India's engagement with the United States of America. Even in the best of the time, Washington has become unhappy over protectionism, weak intellectual property rights, and lack of market access to US companies in India. But the protectionist debate has taken a new turn with America itself turning protectionist under President Trump. The victory of Trump in the 2016 presidential election has had a disruptive effect on America's ties with India. I should note, though, that the degree of disruption has been much less compared to the US relations and ties with some other traditional allies as the Europeans, Germany, Canada, and Mexico. Even though President Trump campaigned on an America First domestic and foreign policy, India placed high hopes on the incoming president. In fact, India was one of the few countries that was cautiously optimistic about Trump in January 2017. Prime Minister Modi had a positive visit to Washington during Trump's first year in office. And Modi seems to have gotten along well with Trump. However, subsequently, not much had been accomplished. This is true in all areas, but it is especially true in terms of the trade relations. One of the continuing successes in India-US relationship has been the ever-growing trade in goods. Last year, the bilateral trade tops $73 billion. In my opinion, though, India and the US are punching way below their weight on trade. Nonetheless, considering when things were, that is an impressive number. In 1991, the year India initiated liberalization of its economy, the bilateral trade was a little over $5 billion. I know that one of the cuts objective, as Uday has outlined, is to bolster US trade economic relations to achieve the target of $500 billion. Based upon the research that I have reviewed, and I think that is a realistic and achievable target within the next decade. Given the erratic failure of the current relationship, however, I do not expect much progress to be made towards that goal over the next 2 years. That's my personal opinion. Having said that, my counsel is to not give up hope, but to work diligently to set the stage for accelerated progress in the next decade. As I said in the article published in the press here in India in November of last year, and I must quote what I said, India must stay the course in its trade relations with the US. It must keep cool, keep calm, and carry on. By doing so, it will make itself a winner and bring the US along with it. Although I do not believe India's persistence will pay off in the next 2 years, that's my personal feeling, I'm confident that it will pay off big time in the next decade. That is why I have labeled the period from 2021 going forward as the partnership relation between India and the United States. I believe that is the right label, not as an optimist, but as a realist who, because of my personal history and bifocal view as an Indian American, can see beyond today's murkiness. Let me elaborate on that. In the years since I came to the United States, I have seen India-US relations at their worst. I have seen them get much better. In my early years in the United States, I watched from a distance the Bangladesh Liberation War and the subsequent India-Pakistan War. The US establishment support and American popular opinion were against India. That was followed by the nationalization of the key sectors of the economy by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and India's first successful nuclear test in Pokhran in 1974. Again, they were not popular in the United States. Believe me, it was not an easy time to be an Indian American student in the United States early 1970s. Fast forward to January 2015, when President Obama visited New Delhi as the chief guest of the 66th Republic Day celebration. I was part of the US business delegation that accompanied him on Air Force One. I witnessed firsthand the love the Indian public expressed for the American president. I was touched. A year and a half later, when Prime Minister Modi visited Washington to address the joint session of the United States Congress, I was there to witness the warm welcome from America and the American Congress, whether they're Democrats, Republican, or Independent. Given this, I have no doubt that Indian-US tie will continue to grow despite the isolationist and protectionist policies of the Trump administration. Trump and Trumpism will not alter America's DNA permanently. What makes me think this and that the future of bilateral relations will be bright? The reasons are the same factors and driving forces that I spelled out for the improvement of ties since the 1990s, and they are, number one, our shared democratic values and common geopolitical interest. As I mentioned earlier, it was geopolitical interest that drove the United States and India closer at the beginning of this millennium. The two countries will continue to share a bond as pluralistic and inclusive democracy with a shared sense of values and goals. Number two, trade and commerce. Trade and commerce has always been powerful forces that brought societies and countries together. As I said, I think $500 billion in terms of US-India trade is imminently doable. Some experts have even predicted that US-India trade could touch the $1 trillion mark by 2030. And I hope it is true, because I like to see our trade get to by 2030 to the $1 trillion. Number three, the presence of the ever-growing and influential Indian American community in the United States. By the time the next US Census takes place, the Indian American population will have crossed the 4 million mark. Additionally, several hundred thousand Indian immigrants are waiting to become permanent residents of the United States and eventually United States citizens. During his historic visit to India in November of 2010, President Barack Obama declared that, and I quote, "We are two free market economies where people have the freedom to pursue ideas and innovation that can change the world." President Obama continued to state, and that is why I believe that India and America are indispensable partners in meeting the challenges of our time. I agree with President Obama's viewpoint, and that is why I have labeled the period from 2021 going forward as the partnership relationship time for India and the United States. I also understand the future is promised to no one. India and the US must work together to earn that level and that future. This session and the work of the Kurds is testimony to the fact that the work is underway. Thanks to Kurds for allowing me to make a small contribution to that process. I look forward to hearing the panel, to gaining new insight that can be employed to create the best possible relationship between the United States and India. After that, I look forward to working with all of you in the future to construct an agenda for achieving that relationship. In closing, thanks for listening to me and letting me share my thoughts with you. God bless you, God bless India, and God bless the United States of America.